We all know King Solomon as the wisest man who ever lived. But what if that wisdom wasn't enough to save him? What if the story of his end is not one of glory, but one of the most profound tragedies in the entire Bible? A man who spoke with God, who built the temple, who ruled over Israel's golden age, and yet died with a divided heart and a fractured legacy. In this video, we will journey past the gold and the glory to uncover the hidden warnings, the slow compromises, and the heartbreaking decisions that led to the downfall of the wisest king and the splitting of a kingdom. This is the story you might not know, the story of how wisdom without obedience becomes tragedy. It began in the days of power, splendor, and peace. Solomon, son of David, had completed the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. This monumental task, long awaited by his father, was now finished. The glory of the Lord filled the inner sanctuary. The Ark of the Covenant was set beneath golden cherubim, and Israel rejoiced. Kings and queens from far lands came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. The Queen of Sheba, in awe, declared that not even half had been told. Gold flowed into the kingdom, silver was counted as nothing, and Solomon's fame reached the ends of the earth. But even in this golden age, something dangerous had begun to take root. Solomon, early in his reign, made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, taking his daughter as wife. This, in itself, may have seemed politically shrewd, but it was the first stone laid on a path of compromise. In time, he would marry not just one or two foreign women, but 700 wives and 300 concubines, many of whom worshipped foreign gods. These weren't just romantic mistakes, they were spiritual ones. According to Deuteronomy 17:16-17, the law had made the warning clear. But Solomon did all three. He imported horses from Egypt and built massive stables. He took hundreds of foreign wives. He amassed silver and gold so abundantly that shields, cups, and entire palace rooms were made of it. This was not just wealth. This was disobedience, painted with royal polish. And yet, God was merciful. After Solomon completed the temple, God appeared to him a second time, just as he had at Gibeon when Solomon first asked for wisdom. But this time, the message carried a warning as well as a promise. "If you walk before me faithfully," God said, "with integrity of heart and uprightness, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever." But he also warned, "If you or your descendants turn away and forsake the commands and go to serve other gods, then I will cut off Israel from the land, and this temple I have consecrated will become a heap of rubble." Solomon had received more than wisdom. He had received a clear condition. And now, as the years rolled on and the glory multiplied, that condition was fading into neglect. The decline was slow, like a majestic ship drifting off course without realizing it. Solomon, the master of Proverbs, the author of deep reflections, began to let his affections wander. The women he had married brought their gods into the land, and Solomon, instead of resisting them, indulged them. He built high places for Chemosh, the vile god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. These were not just harmless idols. These gods demanded child sacrifice, practices utterly abominable in the sight of the Lord. And now, the king who once stood in awe before God, the king who prayed at the temple dedication with trembling lips, was now permitting shrines to false gods within sight of Jerusalem. The Bible does not say Solomon renounced the Lord, but it does say something far more tragic, something that echoes with heartbreak and disappointment. It says, "His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been." That phrase, "not fully devoted," is the key to his undoing. Solomon's wisdom had not left him, but his loyalty had. Then came the second divine encounter. God appeared to Solomon again, but this time it was not to give wisdom or to bless the temple. It was to pronounce judgment. "Since this is your attitude," the Lord said, "and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." But even in this moment, there was mercy. "Nevertheless," God said, "for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son, not the whole kingdom, but 10 tribes." This was the climax. The moment the verdict was declared. From here, the cracks in the kingdom became fractures. God raised up adversaries against Solomon. First came Hadad the Edomite, an ancient enemy of Israel whose family had been slaughtered by Joab during David's campaigns. Hadad fled to Egypt as a child, was raised there, and returned in Solomon's later years with a thirst for vengeance. Then came Rezon of Zobah, a man who built his own kingdom in Damascus and became a constant threat on Israel's northern border. These were not random attacks. They were raised up by God as instruments of discipline. But the most pivotal adversary was not a foreign king. He was one of Solomon's own officials, Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Jeroboam had been put in charge of the labor force of the house of Joseph, a man of action and leadership. One day, as he walked outside Jerusalem, the prophet Ahijah met him. Ahijah wore a new cloak. As Jeroboam approached, Ahijah took that cloak, tore it into 12 pieces, and handed him 10. "Take 10 pieces for yourself," he said, "for this is what the Lord says. I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes." It was a dramatic moment. God's judgment, now illustrated with violent clarity. Word of this reached Solomon, and though aged and weary, the king moved to kill Jeroboam. But Jeroboam fled to Egypt, where he remained until Solomon's death. In his final years, Solomon's kingdom was no longer stable. His reign had begun with wisdom, peace, and glory, but now it was marked by rebellion, foreign enemies, and looming division. And what of Solomon himself? We turn to the book of Ecclesiastes, a collection of reflections widely attributed to him in his old age. "Vanity of vanities," he writes, "all is vanity." He looks back on his achievements, his riches, his gardens, his palaces, and finds them hollow. "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired," he admits, "yet everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind." These are not the words of a man who lived poorly. They are the words of a man who saw the cost of building a life without full devotion to God. Solomon's twilight years were not marked by celebration, but by reflection, and perhaps regret. The same man who had spoken thousands of proverbs, who had built the greatest temple the world had seen, now saw that wisdom and wealth, without obedience, were hollow. He writes, "What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun?" These words are not the musings of a peasant or a cynic. They are the confession of a king who had everything, and yet, in the end, realized he had lost the one thing that mattered most, a heart fully devoted to God. There is a powerful emotional weight here, one that is easy to miss if we only remember Solomon for his early accomplishments. Imagine a man who had once been so favored by God that fire fell from heaven at his prayer. Now watching his legacy unravel, knowing it was his own choices that opened the door. Solomon reigned over Israel for 40 years. But unlike the closing chapters of his father David's life, there is no grand farewell, no final psalm, no royal procession bathed in divine favor. The biblical record is stark. Then Solomon rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam, his son, succeeded him as king. That's it. A reign that began with a dream from God, that built the temple, that ruled over peace and prosperity, ended in silence. The man who had received divine wisdom ended his life estranged from the full favor of the God who gave it. And so, the prophecy began to unfold. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, ascended the throne. The kingdom watched eagerly. Would he walk in the early wisdom of his father, or repeat the mistakes of his later years? Soon, a delegation arrived, led by none other than Jeroboam, returned from exile. They asked Rehoboam for relief. "Your father put a heavy yoke on us," they said, "but if you lighten our burden, we will serve you." Rehoboam sought counsel. First, from the elders who had served his father. They advised mercy and compassion. If you serve these people and give them a kind answer, they will always be your servants. But Rehoboam rejected their wisdom. He turned instead to his young friends, his peers. They told him to assert dominance. Say to them, they advised, "My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it heavier." And that is what Rehoboam did. His pride blinded him. His harsh response shattered the already weakened unity of Israel. 10 of the 12 tribes rebelled, just as Ahijah had foretold. They made Jeroboam king over the northern tribes, forming what would be known as the Kingdom of Israel. Only Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to Rehoboam, forming the Kingdom of Judah. The nation that David had unified, the kingdom that Solomon had glorified, was now broken. And so, the final act of Solomon's story is not merely his own death, but the division of the very kingdom he was entrusted to uphold. The grandeur of the temple, the wealth of the courts, the wisdom of the proverbs, none of it could preserve a kingdom built on compromised obedience. Yet even in this tragedy, there is a deeper truth, one that echoes through the centuries. Solomon was the son of David, but not the final one. His failure points us forward to another king, another son of David, one who would not compromise, one whose heart would never be divided, one whose wisdom was perfect, not just in words, but in action. Jesus Christ. Where Solomon built a temple of stone, Jesus builds a temple of living stones, of people redeemed and filled with the Spirit of God. Where Solomon allowed idols into the land, Jesus cleansed the temple with a whip. Where Solomon's heart drifted, Jesus remained obedient, even unto death. Jesus said, "Wesser, now something greater than Solomon is here." And truly, he is. Solomon's story reveals a sobering reality, that human wisdom, no matter how profound, cannot save us. That wealth, peace, and power are fleeting if they are not rooted in obedience to God. That the slow compromises of the heart are more dangerous than outright rebellion, because they often go unnoticed until it's too late. So, what is the legacy of Solomon? It is both a caution and a call. A caution to all leaders, believers, and seekers, that no amount of success can substitute for a pure heart before God. That the seeds of spiritual downfall are often planted in times of comfort and prosperity. That we must guard our hearts, not just our actions. And it is a call to remember that our hope does not rest in kings or kingdoms, but in the true King, whose wisdom is not just divine, but eternal. Fear God and keep His commandments, Solomon writes in Ecclesiastes' final chapter, "For this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." These are the final words of a man who had seen it all, and in the end found that the fear of the Lord is the beginning and the end of true wisdom. So now, we turn to you. Which part of Solomon's story is the most powerful warning for leaders and believers today? Was it the moment of compromise, the divided heart, the missed opportunity to repent? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story gave you a deeper understanding of the Bible, join our family by subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. And to see what happened right after the split, watch our full video on the two kings, Rehoboam versus Jeroboam, the kingdom divided. It's a story of pride, prophecy, and the painful consequences of failed leadership. Thanks for watching, and remember, wisdom without obedience is not enough.